Mist clung to the forest like a living thing, curling around the twisted trunks of ancient trees. Every shadow seemed to breathe, and every rustle whispered secrets. Lyra moved carefully, her silver cloak trailing over the damp leaves, her heart heavy with grief. She had loved once, truly and completely, but the world had turned against her. She remembered the day like a wound that never healed. The Lycan king, Kale, her fated mate, had stood before her with cold eyes. I cannot bind my future to a mate who cannot bear my legacy," he had said, his voice both gentle and cruel. Lyra's heart had shattered in that single sentence. She had tried to explain, to tell him that her worth was not measured in children, but he had turned away. The hall had echoed with the silence of her exile. Now, months later, she wandered the wilds of the forgotten forest, a place shunned even by the bravest Lycan clans. It was said that spirits roamed these woods, restless and hungry for lost souls, but Lyra did not care. She had no home, no name among the living who mattered. Her heart ached not just for Kyle, but for herself, for the life she had once imagined, and for the dignity stolen from her. Every step was a trial. The mist soaked her hair and clung to her skin, and strange sounds echoed through the trees, the distant howl of wolves, the crack of branches under unseen feet, and the faint, sorrowful whispers of the forest itself. Lyra had grown accustomed to the fear. She had learned to move silently, to trust her instincts, and to call upon the little magic that had always slept within her. It was on the third night, when the moon rose pale and high above the trees, that she found it. A small pup, shivering and alone, its fur matted with mud and frost. Its eyes, bright and amber, locked onto hers with a strange intelligence. Lyra knelt carefully, holding out her hand. The pup hesitated, then crawled into her arms, trembling. She wrapped her cloak around it, feeling warmth spread through her chest. This is a beginning," she whispered, though her voice was thick with doubt. She did not know where this pup had come from, or why it had chosen her, but she felt a spark of purpose she had not known in months. The pup yipped softly, nuzzling against her neck, and for the first time since Kale's rejection, Lyra felt something close to hope. Days passed, and Lyra and the pup traveled deeper into the forest. She learned to hunt again, to read the signs of the land, and to call on the subtle magic of the moonlight. Every night, she would cradle the pup beneath the stars, whispering to it as though it were a child. And every night, she felt the echo of Kale's rejection, a shadow that clung to her heart. But she was not the same Lyra who had trembled before the throne. She had grown stronger, sharper, and more aware of the hidden power that flowed through her veins. The curse that had made her barren was still a wound, but it no longer defined her. She had learned that power could be born from pain, that love could survive betrayal, and that even in exile, a heart could find courage. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in blood-red streaks, Lyra sensed something. The hairs on her neck stood on end, and the pup growled low in her arms. Across the clearing, a figure emerged from the shadows, tall, imposing, cloaked in silver and black. The air seemed to freeze, and Lyra's breath caught in her throat. Kale. He moved with the grace of a predator, his eyes scanning the forest, but they settled on her, and in that moment, everything else fell away. The years of rejection, the heartbreak, the loneliness, they all collided in a single, unbearable wave. Lyra could not look away. The fated bond that had once tied them together pulsed between them, alive and insistent. "You shouldn't be here," Kale said, his voice low, almost a growl. Yet beneath the words, there was something unspoken: shock, awe, a trace of fear. "I go where I please," Lyra replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I am no longer the woman you cast aside." The pup barked, small but fierce, stepping forward as if to challenge the king himself. Kale's eyes widened slightly, and he knelt to meet its gaze, Something unspoken passed between him and the creature, a flicker of recognition, a hint of mystery. Lyra's heart raced. She realized then that this pup was more than it seemed. Its presence was a sign, a thread connecting her past to her future, to KL, to the kingdom, and to something far greater than either of them had imagined. Kale began, then faltered. His jaw tightened. Lyra. He paused, as if the word itself was foreign on his tongue. I did not expect. You did not expect me to survive, Lyra said softly. You did not expect me to return stronger. But I am here, and I am not afraid of you. The tension in the clearing was almost tangible, thick as the mist. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Lyra could feel the power of the moon pulsing through her veins, the latent magic in the pup thrumming like a heartbeat. And she knew, deep in her soul, that this encounter was only the beginning. Kale's eyes darkened with emotion, regret, longing, frustration, and something unnameable. He had always believed that rejecting her was the only way to protect his throne, his legacy, and himself. But now, faced with her strength, her courage, and the mysterious pup, he could no longer ignore the truth. He had been wrong. And the realization tore at him more fiercely than any battle ever could. Lyra stepped forward, holding the pup closer. You cannot change the past, she said quietly. But you can choose what happens next. Kale's gaze fell to the pup, then back to Lyra. The bond that had been broken seemed to stir once more, fragile but persistent. The wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of ancient trees, wet earth, and something magical, something that promised both danger and redemption. The forest around them grew still. Even the mist seemed to pause, as though watching, waiting for their next move. Lyra felt her heart beat faster. Her pulse entwined with the rhythm of the land and the soft growls of the pup. She did not know what Kale would do, whether he would turn away, challenge her, or seek to reclaim what he had lost. But she knew one thing. She would not be broken again. And as the moon rose high above the treetops, casting silver light across their faces, Lyra realized that the story between them was far from over. The exile had ended. But the journey, the real journey, had only just begun. The pup yipped again, breaking the heavy silence. Lyra met Kale's gaze one last time before turning her eyes toward the forest path ahead. The future was uncertain, dangerous, and alive with possibility. But for the first time in months, she felt a flicker of hope, a spark of power, and the certainty that she could face whatever came next, even if it meant standing against the Lycan king himself. And somewhere, deep in the forest, a shadow moved, silent and watching, as though the world itself had marked this reunion. The first chapter of their new story had begun, and neither Lyra nor Kale could yet guess how it would end. Cliffhanger. Lyra's gaze hardened as she turned to the path ahead. She felt the pull of destiny, of magic, loyalty, and fate, and realized that the pup in her arms held the key to not just her own future, but the future of the Lycan kingdom itself. And Kale, the Lycan king, would have to face a truth he had long denied. Love, power, and redemption were never so simple. The kingdom of the Lycan clans was cloaked in the gray light of dawn, mist curling over the stone walls of the capital like slow-moving ghosts. Inside the great hall, the echoes of whispered plots and cautious greetings filled the air. Kyle, the Lycan king, paced near the throne, his mind restless and troubled. The memory of Lyra's return haunted him, her silver cloak in the mist, the pup in her arms, the fire in her eyes that neither fear nor sorrow could extinguish. He had believed that time would heal wounds, that exile would erase her presence. And yet, she had returned stronger, untamed, and more radiant than ever. And worse, she had brought with her a creature that seemed connected to him in ways he could not understand. The pup's amber eyes burned with something old and mystical, something that reminded him of destiny and his own failings. Kale's council of elders tried to draw his attention to the politics of the day, alliances to maintain, rival clans to monitor, and a rising threat from the northern packs who resented his rule. But his thoughts drifted back to Lyra, to the way she had spoken with quiet authority, to the subtle power in her gestures. He could not deny it, she had changed. And with that change, she had become a force he could neither ignore nor control. Meanwhile, Lyra moved through the outskirts of the capital under the shadow of early morning fog. She had returned not to beg forgiveness, nor to plead for her place at the throne. She had returned to reclaim her dignity, to prove her worth, and to understand the truth of her bond with Kale. The pup walked confidently beside her, its small frame deceptively strong, its eyes scanning the streets as though it already knew the dangers that waited. Lyra had named it Solis, for the way its presence lit even the darkest corners of her heart. And indeed, she had begun to suspect that Solis was no ordinary creature. When the moon rose, the pup's howl resonated in ways that made the air vibrate with unseen power. Lyra could feel it in her bones. Solis was tied to her fate, to Kale's, and perhaps to the kingdom itself. Entering the city under the guise of a traveler, Lyra felt the familiar sting of whispers and sideways glances. Those who knew her story murmured among themselves, pointing at the woman who had been cast aside. But Lyra held her head high. She had learned that power demanded presence, and presence commanded respect. She did not need approval, only acknowledgement. Kale watched from a distance, hidden among the shadows of the palace walls. His heart ached as he observed her walking with grace and purpose. Every gesture, every step, reminded him of what he had lost and what he had failed to protect. He had thought that exile would erase the pain, but instead, it had sharpened it. And now, watching Lyra return, he felt the full weight of his mistakes. Yet pride, stubborn and unyielding, kept him from approaching her. He could not simply welcome her back, not without confronting his own failings, and not while the threat of the northern pacts loomed. The kingdom itself seemed to whisper warnings. Power, loyalty, and destiny intertwined, and any misstep could unravel everything. Lyra's first days back were spent gathering information, observing the court from the shadows, and quietly demonstrating her growing strength. She spoke to the people, helped the sick, and defended the weak from petty attacks by the nobles' guards. Word spread quickly. The woman who had been cast out was no longer fragile. She was clever, strong, and dangerous in ways that made even the bravest hesitate. Kale, forced to witness this, felt a swirl of conflicting emotions. Anger at his own hesitation, fear for her safety, and a longing that gnawed at his pride. And yet, he also felt respect for the woman who had survived exile, respect for the strength she had nurtured in solitude, and a cautious awe at the bond she now shared with Solis. The pup, Solis, had begun to reveal its abilities in small, subtle ways. One night, under the silver light of the full moon, it howled at the sky, and the forest beyond the city seemed to shift. Shadows danced unnaturally, whispers of old magic filled the air, and Lyra felt her own powers stir. She understood, suddenly, that Solis was more than a companion. It was a key, a guide, and perhaps the only hope to lift the curse that had bound her fate. Kale learned of this from his scouts, who reported on the mysterious woman moving through the city with a creature that radiated strange energy. His advisors warned him, she could be a threat to the throne, a challenge to his authority. But Kale's instincts told him differently. She was no enemy. She was the one he had rejected, the one whose heart he had broken. And for the first time, he questioned his own judgment. One evening, the tension between them reached a boiling point. Lyra had come to the edge of the palace garden to meet with loyal supporters, quietly organizing aid for those who had been neglected by the court. Kale, unable to resist the pull any longer, stepped from the shadows. His presence startled her, but she did not flinch. "You are bold," he said, his voice low, dangerous, and tinged with admiration. "I did not expect such confidence." Lyra's eyes met his, steady and unwavering. "I am no longer the woman you thought you knew," she replied. "Exile changes a person, so do betrayal and survival. I have returned, Kale, not as a supplicant, but as someone who will stand for what is right and for what is mine." Kale's jaw tightened, He wanted to speak, to explain, to apologize, yet words failed him. Instead, he observed, silently measuring her, noting the strength in her stance, the determination in her gaze, and the quiet power that seemed to radiate from her very presence. The pup, sensing the tension, moved forward, growling softly. Kale's eyes softened slightly as he watched it. The bond between Lyra and Solis, undeniable. Something ancient and sacred seemed to hum in the air, the pulse of destiny, the echo of fated love, and a hint of magic long dormant in the Lycan bloodline. Lyra took a step closer. "You see me now," she said, "and yet, you hesitate. That hesitation is not for me, Kale. It is for yourself. You are afraid of what you might feel, and what you might lose." Kale's hands clenched at his sides. He had always feared weakness, had always believed that power required control and certainty. And now, standing before Lyra, he realized that he had been mistaken. True power lay not in dominance, but in courage, in trust, and in the willingness to face one's own heart. Before either of them could speak further, a sudden cry echoed from the northern watchtowers. Scouts reported that the northern packs were gathering, poised to challenge the throne. The tension in the kingdom, already fragile, now reached a breaking point. Kale and Lyra exchanged a look, understanding, passing silently between them. Their past grievances were dwarfed by the threat to the kingdom, and yet, the unspoken bond that tied them together had never been stronger. Lyra's gaze softened as she looked at Kale. "We must prepare," she said. "Together, we are stronger than any pack that rises against us." Kale nodded, the pride in his chest battling with the longing in his heart. He had rejected her once, blinded by fear and expectation. Now, he saw the truth. She was not only his fated mate, but a force he could not ignore. A partner whose strength could complement his own, and whose courage could ignite the hearts of their people. As the moon rose high above the castle, its silver light spilled over the walls and into the city streets. Lyra knelt beside Solis, placing a hand on the pup's head. "The time is coming," she whispered. "We will face them not just for ourselves, but for the kingdom. And Kale, you will see what it truly means to trust in love." Kale watched from the shadows, the weight of his past mistakes pressing down on him. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of ancient magic, and he realized that the pup's howl, the forest beyond the walls, and Lyra herself were all signs of something greater than the threats at hand. Destiny was calling, and it demanded courage, unity, and sacrifice. The first clash would come soon. The northern packs were not the only danger. Whispers of old magic, rival claimants, and forgotten curses stirred in the air, waiting for the right moment to strike. And yet, for the first time, Kale felt hope, a fragile, trembling hope, born of recognition, trust, and the possibility of redemption. Lyra rose, Solis at her side, and faced the castle gates. The future was uncertain, dangerous, and alive with possibility. She had returned not just to claim her place, but to shape the destiny of the kingdom itself. And Kale, the Lycan king, would have to decide whether to stand beside her or risk losing everything he held dear. Cliffhanger, a howl, louder and more powerful than any before, echoed from the distant mountains. Solis stiffened, ears pricked, and Lyra's eyes widened in recognition. Something ancient, dangerous, and unstoppable was on the move. The battle for the kingdom and for their bond was about to begin, and neither Lyra nor Kale would be ready for what waited in the shadows. The mountains to the north shook with the howls of countless wolves, their voices rising together in a terrifying chorus. The northern packs, long resentful of Kale's rule, had gathered at last, stronger than ever and hungrier for conquest. But even as the threat loomed, Lyra felt something stronger, a fire within her, a courage she had not known in the days of exile. Solis, the pup, yipped sharply, leaping forward, as though sensing the movement of magic through the land. The air seemed to hum with power, and Lyra realized that Solis was not simply a companion. The pup carried a fragment of ancient Lycan magic, a force capable of turning the tide of battle. KL rode beside her, silent, his face tense, yet his eyes constantly flicked to Lyra. He had never before realized the full depth of her strength. Every day of exile, every trial she had endured, had forged her into someone unstoppable. And now, standing beside him, she was more than a mate, she was a partner, a leader, and a force he could not hope to command. Only respect. The northern wolves emerged from the tree line, their fur dark and bristling, eyes glinting like shards of steel. Their leader, a massive, scarred alpha named Draven, stepped forward, challenging Kale's rule with a growl that echoed through the valley. "This land is ours," Draven snarled. "The king grows weak. He has lost his bond, and now we claim what should be ours." Kale raised his voice, strong and commanding. "You challenge me, and you challenge the bond that protects this kingdom. You will find neither weakness nor mercy here." Lyra stepped forward, Solis by her side, her own voice clear and unwavering. "This kingdom will not fall while we stand. You will not take what is ours, not by blood, not by fear, and not by force." The northern wolves hesitated. They had expected a king alone, proud but vulnerable, not a queen returned from exile with a power they did not understand. And then, the pup howled, a single, piercing note that resonated through the valley. The ground vibrated slightly, and shadows flickered unnaturally across the rocks and trees. Lyra felt her magic stir. Tied to the pup's call, the northern pack trembled, uncertain. Kale's eyes widened, realizing the truth. Solis was no ordinary pup. And Lyra, standing there with the creature at her side, was no ordinary mate. Together, they were a force that could challenge fate itself. The battle began. Wolves leapt, claws and teeth flashing. But Lyra moved like a shadow, agile and precise. She called upon her magic, weaving it through Solis's energy to create protective barriers, stunning flashes, and sudden bursts of speed that left their enemies off balance. Kale fought beside her, every strike calculated, every move enhanced by the synchronization of their bond. Amid the chaos, Lyra caught Draven's eye. He was strong, but he underestimated her. With a roar, she summoned a surge of magic through Solis, sending a wave of energy that forced the northern wolves to retreat, momentarily stunned. Kale seized the moment, leaping to confront Draven directly. Their clash was fierce, but Kale now fought not as a king protecting a throne alone, but as part of a bond reborn, united with Lyra. As the battle raged, Lyra realized that her curse, the one that had once defined her as barren and unworthy, was no longer a limitation. Power, strength, and love did not come only from blood or legacy. She had grown, endured, and found purpose beyond what she had imagined. Solis barked sharply, and Lyra called upon the full extent of her magic, creating a brilliant surge of silver light that sent Draven and his pack retreating back into the mountains. The valley grew quiet, the echoes of battle fading into the distance. Lyra knelt beside Solis, placing a hand on the pup's head. Feeling the warmth and magic that had guided them, Kale dismounted, his chest heaving. But his eyes were filled with something new. Awe, respect, and something deeper that he had denied himself for too long. He approached Lyra slowly, every step deliberate, as if afraid she would vanish if he moved too quickly. You were magnificent. I did not see. I could not see what you were capable of. I was blind." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes steady, but her heart beating fast. "You were wrong to cast me out," she said. "But you have learned. That is what matters now. The past is no longer chains around our hearts. It is the fire that guides us." Kale's hands trembled slightly as he reached for hers. "Lyra, I was foolish. I let fear and pride rule me. I rejected what fate gave me, because I could not see my own weakness. But now, I see you. I see us. And I will never turn away again." A gentle wind swept through the valley, carrying with it the scent of pine, wildflowers, and moonlight. Lyra felt it brush her face, soft but insistent, as though the world itself approved of their reconciliation. Solis yipped happily, nuzzling between them. And, for the first time, Lyra felt a sense of completeness she had thought impossible. Kael knelt beside her, resting his hand over hers, the bond between them palpable. "You have forgiven me," he whispered. "And yet, I fear I do not deserve it." Lyra smiled, a gentle, radiant smile that held the weight of months of suffering and growth. "Forgiveness is not about deserving," she said. "It is about understanding and choosing love over fear. I choose love, Kael. Not because I need it, but because it is what I want." The two stood together, the moon high above them, casting silver light over the valley. The kingdom, for the first time in years, felt whole. The northern packs had retreated. The people had witnessed their queen's return, and a new era of unity and strength had begun. But more importantly, Kael and Lyra had discovered a bond deeper than prophecy, stronger than fear, and more enduring than any curse. Yet, even in this moment of triumph, the air carried a faint warning. The howl of distant wolves, faint but persistent, drifted across the mountains. The shadows of the forest seemed to stir, hinting at challenges yet to come. Lyra looked down at Solis, then at Kael, and smiled softly. "We have faced this storm," she said. "And we have won. But the world is larger than our valley, stronger than our courage. There are still battles ahead, and we will face them together." Kael placed his hand over hers once more, sealing the bond not just with words, but with trust, respect, and an understanding forged in the fires of adversity. "Together," he echoed, his voice firm, steady, and filled with promise. The pup barked once, sharply, as if in agreement, and then ran ahead, exploring the land with the curiosity and strength of its growing power. Lyra laughed softly. The sound, light and free, carrying the promise of new beginnings. She realized that her life had changed forever, not because she had been given back what she lost, but because she had discovered the true measure of strength, courage, and love. As the night deepened, the stars appeared, scattered across the sky like silver fire. Lyra and Kael stood together on the hill overlooking the valley, their hands intertwined, the pup at their feet. They did not need words. Their hearts, their bond, and their courage spoke for them. They had survived exile, rejection, and betrayal, and now they faced the future as equals, as mates, as leaders, and as partners in a world that would test them again. But they were ready. The wind whispered through the valley, carrying with it the echoes of distant howls, the pulse of magic, and the promise of new adventures. The kingdom was safe for now. But Lyra knew that life, like the moon, was ever-changing, full of light, shadow, and cycles that demanded courage and unity. And with Kael by her side, she was ready for whatever came next.